I had always prided myself on being careful, attentive, and organized. Between my work, the nursery, and keeping our home running smoothly, I never thought there was room for deception. But as I tapped open the nanny cam app on my phone that evening, the quiet, familiar hum of the nursery transformed into a nightmare. There they were, Blaine, my husband, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Next to him, his law partner, someone I had considered polite, even a friend. They were laughing at me, at the life we had built, at the person I thought I knew. Can you believe she actually thinks she's exciting? Blaine's voice dripped with mockery. She's so boring. I froze, my stomach twisting. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the feed, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Boring? I whispered under my breath. His partner laughed, nudging Blaine with his elbow. And she actually believes she's a good wife. Poor girl has no idea we're taking everything behind her back. Every word hit like a physical blow. I had spent years supporting Blaine, trusting him, raising our child, believing in a shared future, and here they were, conspiring against me, mocking me like I was nothing. I couldn't move. I didn't want to move. My heart pounded so loud in my ears that I couldn't hear anything else. I felt the room tilt, the walls close in. Everything I had known, everything I had believed in, had been a lie. I tapped the screen to rewind, hoping somehow I had misunderstood. But no, every word, every laugh, every callous remark confirmed it. He had been having an affair, and he was plotting behind my back. And in their cruel amusement, he made it clear I was just expendable. Tears blurred my vision as I sank onto the nursery floor, gripping the edge of the crib for support. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How much of our life together was real? Was our child's father, the man I had loved, capable of such calculated cruelty? I have to get out of here, I whispered to myself, trembling. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and ran to the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key. I didn't care about the streets, the traffic, the danger. All I knew was that I needed to see someone who could help, my lawyer, someone who could take action immediately. The engine roared to life, my vision blurred from tears. I pulled out into the street, gripping the wheel as my heart threatened to burst. And then it happened. A car swerved across the lane without warning. Time slowed. I saw the truck barreling toward me, the metal impact inevitable. I braced myself, gripping the steering wheel with every ounce of strength I had left. The world exploded. Glass shattered. Metal crunched. The car rolled 3 times, each moment stretching into eternity. And in the suspended seconds where I hovered between life and death, something unexpected happened. I saw myself. Not the woman crying in her car, not the betrayed wife, not the victim of a cruel twist of fate, but a version of me I had never met. She was standing tall, strong, unbothered, with fire in her eyes and purpose in her stride. She wasn't afraid of Blaine, of betrayal, of the world. She was unstoppable. And as the ambulance rushed toward me, the siren screaming, I realized something profound. Harper Rhodes, the woman who had been broken tonight, was dying in that moment. But a new Harper, fearless, strategic, and ready to reclaim her life, was being born. I woke to the sterile smell of antiseptic and the low hum of hospital machines. My body ached in places I didn't know could hurt, and my head throbbed with a relentless pulse. But beneath the physical pain, something deeper had shifted. The Harper who had cried over betrayal, who had felt powerless and small, was gone. Silas Vance walked into my room like he owned the air around him, and in a way, he did. Not with arrogance, but with the kind of presence that commanded attention, respect, and, strangely, trust. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and measured. "I see you survived the crash. Not everyone does." I blinked at him, the fog of the accident still clinging to my mind. "Who are you?" My voice sounded weaker than I expected, but I felt a spark of defiance, a refusal to seem fragile. "I'm Silas Vance," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Rival attorney to your husband. And I've been waiting for the moment someone like you decided to stop playing the victim." I swallowed hard. Rival attorney? My husband. The pieces started to click. Blaine's betrayal, the schemes I had glimpsed on the nanny cam, they weren't just personal. His arrogance extended to his practice, his reputation, his entire empire. Silas stepped closer, resting his hand briefly on the back of the chair near my bed. He's dangerous, Harper. But so are you if you choose to be. You can fight back. You can take everything he thinks he owns and make him regret underestimating you. Something inside me stirred. The fear, the shock, the hurt, it was still there, raw and jagged. But it was now tempered with determination. I want to, I said quietly, my voice stronger than I expected. I want him to pay for everything. Silas's eyes darkened with approval. Good. That's the first step. But this isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming control, strategy, and making sure the man who underestimated you never has the power to hurt you again. He pulled a chair next to my bed, opening a folder of files, evidence, and documents. Every piece was a thread in the unraveling of Blaine's empire. Financial irregularities, client mismanagement, and a pattern of manipulation all lay bare on the table before me. You're giving me a map, I said, my pulse quickening. A way to destroy him. Not destroy, Silas corrected, his voice low and sharp. Expose. Reclaim. Level the playing field. You've been underestimated all your life, not just by him, but by everyone who thought you were predictable, compliant, boring. Now it's your turn to show them exactly who Harper Rhodes really is. I felt a rush of adrenaline, the first taste of the new me. The Harper who had been passive, polite, and fearful was dead in that accident. In her place stood a woman sharpened by betrayal, awakened by near death, and fueled by the knowledge that Blaine had made a monumental mistake. He thought I would crumble. And you? I asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Why are you helping me? Silas's expression softened for the first time, a flicker of something real in his eyes. Because I've watched him for years. I've seen the damage he does to people, and I've waited for someone like you, smart, strong, and underestimated, to finally stand up to him. And because you're not boring. The corner of my mouth twitched into a smirk. Not boring, huh? Not even close, he said, eyes locking with mine. And trust me, Harper, you'll need every ounce of fire in you. He's ruthless. But so are you. I leaned back, feeling the weight of the plan forming in my mind. My body hurt. My heart ached. But for the first time since the crash, I felt a flicker of power. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist, a force, and with Silas by my side, I would dismantle everything Blaine thought he owned, including his pride, his law practice, and the illusion of control over my life. And as I met Silas's gaze, I realized something startling. I was intrigued by him. Not just professionally, but personally. There was something magnetic in his intensity, his confidence, and the way he treated me as an equal. The thought made my pulse quicken, a dangerous, thrilling sensation I hadn't felt in years. The new Harper Rhodes had arrived, and she was ready to fight. The morning air was crisp as I left the hospital, each step toward the car a reminder of how far I'd already come. The crash had left bruises and aches, but more importantly, it had left me reborn. The Harper who once trembled at betrayal had died. The new Harper, strategic, fierce, unbothered, was emerging. Silas waited in the sleek black car, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. Ready? He asked, voice low, calm, but carrying an undercurrent of something unspoken. I slid into the passenger seat, buckling in. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, keeping my tone steady despite the nerves bubbling under the surface. He started the car, and the city rolled past us in a blur. First step, he said, glancing at me. We hit him where it hurts most, his reputation. I frowned. The old Harper would have recoiled from confrontation. The new Harper, however, leaned forward. Go on, I said, gripping the edge of the seat. Tell me the plan. Silas handed me a folder, thick with documents and emails. Evidence. Emails, financial statements, client complaints. I've pulled everything I could find that shows his mismanagement and unethical behavior. The goal is to make sure everyone, clients, colleagues, and the courts, sees the real Blaine Harrison. I study the documents, my pulse quickening. This is perfect. It's meticulous. Nothing can be twisted or spun against me. Exactly, he said, eyes fixed on the road. You won't just be exposing him. You'll be untouchable in the process. And trust me, he won't know what hit him. There was a thrill in the precision, a sense of control I had never felt before. Each email, each financial misstep, was a weapon. Each carefully planned leak was a step toward dismantling the man who had betrayed me so thoroughly. Silas, I began, hesitating for a moment. The thought made my cheeks warm, and I felt the old instinct to retreat, to protect my heart, rise. Why do I feel like this isn't just about revenge anymore? He glanced at me, the faintest shadow of a smile tugging at his lips. Because it isn't, he said. You're alive, Harper. You've survived the worst he could throw at you. And in the process, you're realizing your own power, and maybe you're noticing me a little too. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure. A little? You mean a lot. He smirked, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Maybe. But we don't have time for distractions yet. First, we dismantle Blaine. Then we see what comes next. I nodded, adrenaline coursing through me. The thrill of plotting, of finally taking action, was intoxicating. It wasn't just revenge, it was liberation. And the fact that Silas was there, strong, protective, sharp, and somehow utterly magnetic, added a dimension I hadn't anticipated. Our first move was strategic, a carefully timed leak to a former client who had been misled by Blaine's firm. The reaction was immediate. Emails flooded in, calls made, whispers spreading about the cracks in his practice. I watched the first domino fall and felt a strange mix of vindication and exhilaration. Later, as we reviewed the results in Silas's office, he leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. You handled that beautifully, he said, eyes fixed on me. Confident, calm, precise. Not the Harper Harrison everyone thought they knew. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The old me wouldn't have survived this long, I said, a hint of steel in my voice. The new me doesn't just survive. She conquers. Silas's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, the tension between strategy and desire shifted. He leaned closer, voice low, almost intimate. And the best part? You're not just conquering him, you're learning how unstoppable you are. And I get a front row seat to watch it. My heart skipped, but I kept my composure. Yet beneath the surface, a warmth spread, one that wasn't just about victory. It was about him, the man who saw me, believed in my strength, and made me feel alive again. The first move was successful. The battle had begun. And in that moment, I knew two things. Blaine Harrison had underestimated me, and I had begun to feel something dangerously like trust, and maybe even desire for Silas Vance. The city seemed quieter somehow, as if it sensed the storm that was coming for Blaine Harrison. I spent the morning reviewing more documents Silas had pulled together. Bank statements, client complaints, even internal messages that revealed his manipulations. Every detail was a thread, and I intended to unravel his empire strand by strand. You're becoming terrifyingly good at this, Silas said, leaning against the edge of the desk, arms crossed. His eyes, sharp and calculating, held something more: approval, admiration, and perhaps a flicker of something personal I wasn't ready to name. I smirked. I'm a quick study. The old me would have crumbled after the first betrayal. The new me? She doesn't just survive. She hunts. He chuckled softly. And yet, you're still human. Don't forget that. There's a difference between strategic and reckless. You need to keep yourself safe. I rolled my eyes, but deep down, I appreciated his concern. Safe is boring. Strategic is everything. Our first major escalation involved one of Blaine's high-profile cases. Silas and I carefully exposed conflicts of interest and questionable tactics to the opposing counsel and the press, timing everything to coincide with his firm's board meeting. The fallout was immediate. Whispers, rumors, clients pulling out, colleagues questioning his judgment. Watching it all unfold from Silas's office, I felt a surge of triumph and something else, something hotter. A flutter in my chest every time he leaned close to review a document with me, his hand brushing mine ever so slightly. Each touch, each glance, carried an unspoken tension that made the strategic battle between Blaine and me feel secondary to the electricity building between Silas and me. "Careful," he murmured one afternoon, his voice lower than usual as he stood close behind me, watching my fingers fly over the keyboard. "If you push too hard, he'll strike back. And he'll be dangerous." I paused, eyes meeting his in the mirror reflection of the office window. "I can handle him," I said, voice steady. But my heart betrayed me, thumping against my ribs as his gaze lingered a fraction too long, the tension palpable. Later that evening, after a particularly intense day of strategizing and carefully leaking information, Silas walked me to my car. The night was quiet, only the soft hum of traffic in the distance. "You know," he said, his hand brushing lightly against my elbow, "I've been doing this a long time, Harper. I've faced sharks, manipulative partners, and some of the most ruthless attorneys in the city. But you've got something they don't. You've got fire, and a mind that refuses to be underestimated." I looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close he was, how the heat of his body radiated against mine. "You make it sound like a compliment," I whispered, my pulse quickening. "It is," he said, voice low, deep, almost a growl. "And don't think I haven't noticed how you keep me on edge, too. Sharp, clever, and irresistible." My breath caught. For a moment, the world of strategy and revenge blurred into something else, the attraction, the desire simmering between us. But I shook my head, forcing focus. Blaine still had claws in my life, and the stakes were higher than my own heart. The next few days were a careful dance. We escalated our moves against Blaine, exposing embezzlement and manipulation, but every step carried risk. One evening, Blaine called, his voice laced with venom, clearly aware someone was undermining him. "You think you can ruin me, Harper?" he sneered. "You're nothing without me." I smiled coldly, leaning back in my chair. "I'm everything you never believed I could be," I said, glancing at Silas, who gave me a small, approving nod. That night, after Blaine's threats, we stayed late in the office. Silas brushed a strand of hair from my face, his hand lingering. "You're incredible," he murmured, voice low and intimate. "And I'm not just talking about the plan." I swallowed, heart racing. "Neither am I," I admitted softly, leaning slightly toward him. The tension was undeniable now, no longer just professional. Each look, each touch, each shared victory pulled us closer, and I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced since before the betrayal, a thrill not of revenge, but of connection, of desire, of possibility. Blaine had thought he could control me. He had no idea I was learning, growing, and discovering a fire within me, one that didn't just burn for revenge, but for life, and for the man standing quietly beside me, ready to fight by my side, and perhaps ready to fight for me too. The moment had arrived. After weeks of careful planning, calculated leaks, and strategic maneuvering, it was time to turn the tables on Blaine. Every document, every piece of evidence, every whispered warning we had planted led to this, the apex of our plan. Silas and I sat across from each other in his office, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. "Everything is set," he said, voice calm but laced with intensity. "By the end of today, Blaine won't know what hit him." I nodded, a thrill of anticipation coursing through me. "He underestimated me," I said, voice steady. "And that's his biggest mistake." Silas leaned back, studying me for a moment, his gaze sharp but strangely soft. "You've changed so much, Harper. The woman who walked into that nursery, crying and betrayed, she wouldn't have survived this. But this Harper, calculated, fearless, unbothered, she's unstoppable." I felt a warmth rise to my cheeks, both from pride and the closeness of Silas. His presence was magnetic, and every subtle brush of his hand, every glance that lingered a second too long, made my pulse quicken. But I forced my focus back on the task. The first move was subtle. A strategic leak to his top clients, carefully phrased emails exposing the mismanagement and unethical conduct. Within hours, calls started pouring in, partners questioning, clients pulling accounts. Blaine's arrogance crumbled quietly but rapidly. "I love the way you handle this," Silas murmured, leaning close to show me the live updates on his laptop. His hand brushed mine again, a fleeting contact that sent shivers up my spine. I allowed myself a small smile. "I've learned from the best," I replied, not hiding the playful teasing. The tension between us was no longer subtle. It was a heady mix of adrenaline, desire, and the thrill of shared victory. By mid-afternoon, Blaine was panicking. His calls went unanswered. Colleagues avoided him. His public image, carefully curated over years, was unraveling in real time. And the final move, the one that would crush him completely, was set. A public expose combining financial misconduct with personal betrayal, timed to coincide with a major firm announcement. Silas turned to me, his dark eyes intent. "You ready for this?" I took a deep breath, letting the power of the moment fill me. "I've been ready for this since the day I saw him laughing on that nursery floor," I said firmly. It's time he felt what it's like to be powerless. We executed the plan flawlessly. Within hours, news outlets had the story. Blaine's phone rang incessantly. Partners demanded explanations. The humiliation, the panic, the complete collapse of control, it was intoxicating to witness, and I felt no guilt, only justice. Later, as the dust settled, Silas and I remained in his office, watching Blaine's empire implode like a carefully constructed house of cards. He turned to me, and for a brief moment, the professional mask fell away. "You are incredible," he said quietly, stepping closer. His hand brushed mine again, lingering longer this time. "Not just with strategy, but with strength, fire, and heart. You're remarkable, Harper." Heat rose to my cheeks. "And you?" I asked softly, meeting his gaze. "You've been at my side this whole time, and I can't tell if I should be grateful or more than grateful." He smiled, low and slow, a dangerous curve that made my chest tighten. "You don't have to decide right now. But know this, I've admired you from the first moment you stood up to Blaine, and I'm not letting go now." My pulse raced, but for once, it wasn't from adrenaline or revenge. It was him, the man who had fought alongside me, who had seen my fire, and who was quietly becoming the center of my world. And as our hands met fully, fingers entwining, I realized the truth. Blaine Harrison was finished. And Harper Rhodes? She was alive, unshaken, and finally beginning to live, with Silas by her side. The office was quiet, the hum of the city outside our windows the only reminder that the world continued beyond our little bubble. Blaine's empire had crumbled, his clients pulled, and his credibility shattered. For the first time, Harper Rhodes could breathe freely, and so could I. Silas looked up from his laptop, eyes meeting mine with that sharp, knowing gaze I'd grown used to. But today, there was something softer in them, something more intimate. "You've changed, Harper," he said quietly. "Not just the woman Blaine thought he knew, but more than that. You're alive. Truly alive." I smiled, a small warmth spreading in my chest. "I feel it too," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "For the first time in years, I feel free, powerful, unstoppable." He leaned back in his chair, stretching, and let his eyes roam over me, not in judgment or calculation, but in admiration. "And beautiful," he added softly, almost as an afterthought, but my pulse skipped anyway. I tried to keep my composure, focusing on the files in front of us. Yet every glance, every accidental touch of our hands as we reached for documents, made it increasingly difficult to concentrate. There was a tension now, an unspoken electricity that threaded between us. "Silas," I said, hesitating. My voice caught in my throat. "After all this, I don't know what comes next. I mean with you." He rose from his chair, crossing the office slowly, and stopped just inches from me. "Harper," he said, voice low, measured, but full of intent. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever. You've shown me what strength, intelligence, and courage look like, and I want more than just to admire it from a distance. I want to be here. For everything." The words hit me, and I felt something I hadn't in months, a shiver of anticipation, a rush of emotion that wasn't fear or anger. I met his gaze, seeing sincerity, desire, and respect all rolled into one. I started unsure, but the barrier inside me, built from betrayal, heartbreak, and trauma, was cracking. He smiled, softening, and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. "We don't have to rush, Harper. I'll wait. I'll give you time to trust, to heal, to want me in your life." I felt my chest tighten, warmth spreading as I allowed myself to lean slightly into him. "I think I'm ready," I whispered, my voice trembling not with fear but with anticipation. That night, after a long day of cleaning up the last of Blaine's legal mess, we sat on the balcony of my apartment, the city lights sparkling like scattered stars below. Silas handed me a cup of tea, and we sat side by side, shoulders brushing, a comfortable silence settling between us. "You know," he said, breaking the quiet, "you weren't just underestimated by Blaine. Everyone thought they knew you. But the truth, the real you, is extraordinary." I glanced at him, a small smile playing on my lips. "And you aren't what I expected either," I said softly. "I thought you'd just be the rival attorney, the one watching everything from the sidelines. But you became more. A partner, a guide, someone I can trust." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone I can love." I didn't answer with words. Instead, I let the moment speak. Our hands found each other fully, fingers interlacing. When he leaned down, our lips met, a soft, tentative kiss at first, tasting the warmth and safety I hadn't felt in years. But as the minutes passed, it deepened, slow and deliberate, a promise of something more. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal lift completely. Blaine Harrison had tried to break me, but he had only forged a new Harper, strong, fearless, and capable of love that was honest, equal, and electrifying. And Silas? He wasn't just a companion in revenge. He was becoming the center of my world, the one I wanted by my side in every victory, every quiet moment, and every uncertain day ahead. The first quiet morning after Blaine's empire had fully collapsed felt surreal. Sunlight spilled across the city streets, painting everything gold, and I could finally breathe without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. For the first time since the nanny cam revelation, I felt in control, truly in control of my life, my destiny, and my heart. Silas arrived at my apartment mid-morning, not with papers or strategies, but with a quiet smile and a cup of coffee for each of us. "No plans today," he said, settling into the couch. "Just us." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical yet intrigued. "Just us? After everything, you want a day off from revenge?" He chuckled, leaning back, letting the morning sun hit his face. "You did all the heavy lifting yesterday. Today, you deserve a moment to be human, not a strategist plotting someone's downfall." I took the cup he offered, the warmth seeping into my hands. "Human, huh?" I said softly. "I've been more machine than person lately." "You were reclaiming your life," he said gently. "That takes strength. But strength isn't just in battles and strategy. It's in allowing yourself to feel joy, desire, even vulnerability." I swallowed, thinking about the months I had spent running on adrenaline and calculated moves. My heart, once broken and hardened, had started to thaw with him. "Vulnerability," I murmured, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." He reached over, his hand covering mine, warm and grounding. "You'll remember," he said softly, "and I'll be here when you do." I felt my chest tighten at the intimacy in his voice, the steadiness in his gaze. After everything, betrayal, near death, and months of orchestrating revenge, I realized I had allowed myself to care again. And not just care, but desire, trust, and perhaps even love. We spent the morning talking about small things: favorite books, childhood memories, moments that shaped us. Silas laughed, a rich, genuine sound, and I found myself smiling, leaning into him without thinking. Every brush of his hand against mine, every glance, made my pulse quicken. Later, he shifted closer, resting his forehead lightly against mine. "I know you've been through hell," he said, voice low and earnest. "And I know Blaine's betrayal isn't something you forget overnight. But Harper, you're extraordinary. Strong, smart, fearless. And yet you still let yourself feel. That's what makes you remarkable." I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. "I don't think I realized how much I'd been holding back," I whispered. "From life, from love, even from myself." He cupped my face gently, thumb brushing my cheek. "And now you can have both. You can be strong, unstoppable, and still allow yourself happiness. I'll make sure of it every step of the way." Our lips met slowly, tenderly at first, then with a growing intensity that mirrored the emotions swirling between us. It was different from our first kiss, deeper, more vulnerable, layered with trust and the shared understanding of everything we'd endured. Later, lying side by side on the couch, hands intertwined, I realized that Blaine's betrayal had forged something unexpected, a new Harper, confident and fearless, who had found not just revenge, but a man who could match her strength and cherish her heart. Silas whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my face, "You're my equal, Harper. Not someone I have to protect, but someone I choose to stand beside every day." And in that quiet, sunlit room, I allowed myself to believe it. The battle was over, the strategy complete, and now, with Silas, I could explore life fully, fearless, unbroken, and deeply, irrevocably alive. The morning was crisp, the city alive with its usual hum, yet for me, it felt different, lighter, freer, finally mine. Blaine Harrison, the man who had once dictated my every move, who had mocked me from that nursery floor, was now a shadow of himself. Every client who had abandoned him, every whisper of scandal that Silas and I had carefully orchestrated, had done its work. Silas arrived at my apartment, his usual stoic presence softened by a rare, warm smile. He carried 2 cups of coffee and a quiet confidence that always seemed to ground me. "Good morning," he said, handing me a cup. "The world looks a little brighter, doesn't it?" I smiled, feeling the weight of months of strategy, fear, and heartbreak lift with every passing second. "It does," I admitted, taking a sip. "And it feels real this time. Not forced, not shadowed by betrayal." He leaned against the doorframe, eyes sweeping over me like he always did, but this time there was no tension, no hidden warning. Just admiration and something deeper, something that made my chest ache in the best way possible. "Blaine?" I asked, almost casually, though I knew he had been rendered powerless. "Finalized," Silas replied. "His license is revoked, the lawsuits filed against him, and every last client account transferred. He's left with nothing but his pride, and that, I suspect, will sting more than money ever could." A flicker of satisfaction warmed me. The old Harper would have been consumed by anger, but the new Harper, reborn in betrayal and forged in strategy, was calm, deliberate, and, yes, victorious. Silas stepped closer, and I noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the tension in the air that was no longer about strategy, but something entirely different. "You know," he murmured, voice low and intimate, "seeing you like this strong, unstoppable, and undeniably alive, it's hard not to want to claim a part of your world for myself." I felt a shiver run through me. The months of tension, subtle touches, and stolen glances culminated in this moment. "Silas," I whispered, voice trembling just slightly, "I think I've wanted that all along." He closed the distance, cupping my face gently, his thumb brushing across my cheek. "Then let's not waste another second," he said, voice soft but commanding. And when our lips met, it wasn't tentative anymore. It was deliberate, full of the promise of shared victories and a future neither of us would ever take for granted. The days that followed were a blur of final legal cleanups, interviews, and public announcements that firmly cemented Blaine's downfall. But amidst the chaos, Silas and I found quiet moments, coffee on the balcony, long walks through the city streets, laughter spilling over shared jokes. Our connection deepened, moving beyond attraction into trust, companionship, and love that was fearless and mutual. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city in gold and rose, Silas took my hand in his. "Harper Rhodes," he said, voice low and filled with certainty, "I've watched you rise from betrayal, from near death, from everything he tried to take from you. I want to rise with you, in life, in love, in everything. Will you allow me?" I looked into his eyes, seeing not just desire but unwavering respect, protection, and partnership. "Yes," I whispered, feeling a surge of joy I hadn't felt in years. "Yes, Silas. I choose us." We sealed the moment with a kiss under the fading sun, the city around us buzzing with life. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, fully alive, with a man who valued my strength, my intelligence, and my heart equally. Blaine Harrison was a lesson in betrayal. Silas Vance was the proof that love could be honest, fearless, and beautiful. And as we stood together, hands intertwined, hearts aligned, I knew this was only the beginning of a life filled with passion, purpose, and a happiness I had fought so hard to reclaim. The old Harper Rhodes had died in that moment of betrayal. The new Harper Rhodes lived, unstoppable, unbothered, and finally, deeply, irrevocably loved.